For this video, I'm using the LK Chen Shuang Dao. It's based off of the New Way Dao design in an antique pair from the Qing dynasty. You can find out more information at lkchensword.com. Check it out in the link in the description down below. Hey, what's up? It's Sifu Kuttel, and in this video, we're going to be working with the Seung Dao. So grab your Seung Dao and let's get to work on blocking and countering. So we're going to be using the same block every single time. We're using this as a raising upward block, and then we're going to be following it with a number of techniques. And this just shows the versatility of what we have available from just a single entry point or a single opening once we connect to our opponent. Now, of course, this could be a defensive block. Somebody's attacking in. You could be blocking with that first blade, and then you can go in for your next attack. It could be more of an attacking technique. I could use this to push their blade up and out of the way and then follow up with a countering technique. So there's a couple of ways that we can apply this one in more of a combat context. But for the purpose of this video and drilling and learning this, I want you to pay more attention to your blade positioning and the timing of your when you employ these techniques. So we're going to be doing this in 3 phases. The first phase is going to be to block, isolate just that, and then our next technique. Then the second phase, once you are comfortable with applying all of this with power, is going to be more of that 1-2 timing, kind of like jab cross when it comes down to fighting with our hands. So it's going to be pop, pop during that. Then we're going to have our final timing. Our third phase is going to be simultaneous. So as this comes up, the technique happens. Now again, we're going to be practicing this with a number of techniques. You'll see as we do it, but just be prepared to practice each of these in 3 phases because there's a lot you can learn and develop. Grab your swords, let's go get to work. Now, when it comes to blocking with this front hand, with this front blade, it's the ideal in Chinese swordsmanship to block with the flat of the sword. This is especially if we're coming up against edged weapons. So we want to keep that blade edge forward. Slightly upward is okay depending on what the attack is coming in, or if we're just using this to push their weapon up out of the way to clear a path. Now, this was also used against long or pole-armed weapons. So sometimes you would lead with the blade edge because this could give you a chance to catch and trap their weapon. So they're trying to figure out how to get rid of this blade being cut into it, and you have free reign with your other blade, which is very useful when you're up against something with superior reach. Now, it doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. You can still use the flat of the blade. But again, this is the Chinese swordsmanship ideal. So we're going to practice for it, even if we don't always have the opportunity. And there will be incidental edge-to-edge contact. Okay? So from our first position, we're going to take the most fundamental. This is going to be a forward thrust. Now, the shape of the New Way Dao is perfect for this style of thrust because the edge, the tip of the sword, has a good alignment with our arms. So we're going to have a lot backing it up. And because we're going to be starting from our neutral stance, and this hip, our blocking side hip is going to be forward, and our striking side hip is going to be back, we don't really gain anything from articulating the blade itself. It may be easier to get in towards the ribs or the soft spots or up towards the throat if you turn the blade, but you lose a lot of stability in the wrist. So we're going to be going straight in with the blade. It'll have the blade edge down. Okay? So our first version, we'll start with our block. Remember, you want to press upward. We want to have some extension forward. Don't let the blade come back towards you. So we want to be pressing and clearing here. And then from here, we'll bring in our back foot so we can get a little more hip to turn into it as we move in and forward thrust. Okay? So again, we have 1, 2. Really focus on power here. 1, 2. We can step in with both. 1, 2. Of course, this is not going to be combat timing. This is for you to focus on your fundamentals. So we look, make sure it's in a good position, make sure we've covered our head when we have that block. And that second one, make sure that we have good alignment, good connection from the hip to to thrust forward, okay? Now, our next way that we're going to work on it is a combination style. This is more realistic, and this is probably how you're going to find it if you're using it in a defensive manner, okay? So we initiate the block, 1, 2 for the thrust. It's just quick, pop, pop, okay? Again, 1, 2, return, 1, 2, return, 1, 2, return. Make sure to keep good pressure here. Don't let it die off when we're working with the thrust. Now the final version is more of an advancing version. We're attacking as we're doing this. We're clearing and striking at the same time. So make sure from our neutral position, everything starts at the same time. Our step, our block, our thrust. You don't want to have anything show up too soon. Otherwise, you're going to let your opponent know what's happening. So from here, block and thrust and return. Same time. 1. And again, for our next technique, we are going to use a horizontal cut across. Now, technically, you could go in either direction, but if we're raising up for a block, you have to have your blade already crossed underneath. So this is possible, but it's not as common that you will find rather than just cutting to the inside with our back hand. And we're going to apply this the exact same way as before, except for we can change up the footwork. So we can block for our first one, and then from here, we can cut horizontal. Again, this is more or less same position as before. Again, block, cut horizontal. If I'm facing towards you, block, cut horizontal. Again, block, cut horizontal. When I end, the tip of the sword is still pointing towards you. I don't want to end up going too far away. Now, we can actually change our footwork, and this time we're going to use a really follow-through, good cut. So this time we will cut all the way across, flip the blade over, and rest the spine of the sword against our ribs. So from here, we'll block up, get the sword ready, step, and cut through, resting on the ribs. If I'm facing this way, again, I have my block, cut. This is going to give us a lot more room and a lot more blade contact to our target, but we do need to be closer when we use this one. So again, from this starting position, giving it some good power, complete separation of techniques, we'll have block, and we'll stay with this foot forward, cut. Again, block, cut. One more, block, cut. Now separating, block, and then we'll have the big follow through, cut. Again, block, cut. And one more, block, cut. Now, of course, our next step is to make it more of a combination. So from here, we'll keep the same front foot forward, block, cut, return, block, cut, return, block, cut. And then with the full step through, 1, 2, return, 1, 2, return, 1, 2. Now we can move in for simultaneous, and this is going to seem more like a guard position and less like a block into it. So from our neutral position, keeping this foot forward, we have our cut, again, cut, and again, cut. Now stepping through, it really becomes just more of a position for the guard. You can think of this as you initiate with the cut, and this preps this clears the path. So we step 1, step 2, step 3. Now we get to a point where I do have to make some distinction for the path of travel. Once we raise this guard up, it's very hard to do any kind of a vertical technique underneath. And this also leads to a slight amount of difficulty if we're going to stay up high and we're trying to attack diagonally. So we may start turning the upper body, withdrawing the shoulders slightly. But as you do this, you still want to keep the blade forward as much as possible. You see the tip of the blade becomes even more forward at this point. Now we are going to be using a diagonal cut, and you can use this as a chopping cut if we're going to go and attack towards the throat or the collarbone or the shoulder, or even the hand in the front. You can trap the blade and then hit the hand. But to change things up a little bit, I also want to use attacking low. Now a lot of times people underestimate a low attack because they think there's a disadvantage of getting down low. And yes, there is if you are not used to it and you move very slow. So a good thing to do is just simply practice low stances, and then you can develop speed and power over time. So we'll start from our neutral position again, and we'll start with that first phase. Block, and then we'll drop our stance, cutting down towards the leg, and then return. Now, notice as I do this, I don't hit my knee to the ground. In the style of Choi Li Fut that I teach, there is no knee dropping down to the ground when you do a low kneeling stance. This could be dangerous depending on whatever terrain you're on. So you want to actually distribute that by, instead of dropping that knee straight down, press outward a little bit so we have more of a platform base, okay? But this is something that will develop your leg muscles to be able to drop down fast when you're using this in more of a sparring context. Again, block, get this hand ready, drop, and chop low. Again, block, chop. Again, block, chop. Now we can again do this with that 1-2 motion. So that combination style, 1-2. Again, 1-2, and again, 1-2. Now, like I said, dropping low is underestimated. We don't often think of doing that. The benefit to this is that we have protection up above because of our other sword. So this gives us a chance to stay protected as we move underneath and attack below to give us some time. But in context where we're used to just seeing people up above and attacking up above and then a quick drop, can be often unpredictable. It's hard to read and it's hard to defend against, okay? We may end up just attacking that blocking hand, okay? So again, we'll do our 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. And then of course we have that single motion, that simultaneous block and attack, drop, block and attack. For our final technique, we're going to use an upward vertical cut. And this one offers us an ability to use both our front leg forward and apply this, or to step forward with our back leg. So you have an opportunity to do either way. One thing that you'll find is stepping forward will give you a lot more reach, a lot more range for this. And if you have good connection with your opponent, it allows a lot of attacking underneath, okay? So again, we'll start with our first phase, block, get this hand ready. We're gonna come up and scoop. Notice how I end this position. This is really key. The pommel of the sword, my hand position, is higher than the tip of the sword. Once we start turning this up, we start really compromising our wrist and our grip position. We have just as much a chance of having this blade disarmed from our grip as we do accidentally letting it slip out of our hand and towards us when we're trying to do things at full speed. So make it a habit to always keep your hand higher than the tip of the sword. Now, it may not be perfect vertical. You may find that you come across slightly. So this is more upward diagonal, but again, we're looking at more of a vertical, we're trying to be as vertical as possible. We're not trying to be wide sweeping diagonal here. Again, that changes our wrist and our elbow position. So just a slight diagonal. Now, the last thing is, if you want to raise the tip of the sword, raise your hand. But really, we don't need to attack too high. We're going to be coming up underneath anyway. We're attacking towards their hand, towards their leg. And if we can reach towards the torso. That's great too. We can hit the arms. We have lots of opportunities here. Okay, not everything has to be lopping the head off. Okay, so again, we'll take this from our first phase, block, bring the tip down, and then cut upward. Again, we're going to come up, block, tip down, upward. Now we can also start from a more of an open position here, sword forward, sword back, block, scoop and up. Again, block and up. Now, let's put this together into more of the combo speed. This can be from both blades back, or we can have both blades low, or just from this position as well. But it's going to be 1, 2, and again, 1, 2, and again, 1, 2. Now, our final way, we're going to swing up simultaneously. It's still going to have that 1, 2 effect to it because it just by placement, this sword's going to be reaching the opponent a little bit sooner. Okay, so again, simultaneously, simultaneously, simultaneously. Now, as I said earlier, we can actually step forward with our back foot. So from here, we can also get used to starting with the open stance, or we can have our hand position in the neutral stance. Okay, but basically we're going to block and advance forward. So we block, step, cut. Now you'll notice I sink in my stance after I cut. Okay, so if I'm facing this way, I block, step, I'm pretty much high up in my stance, and then I sink down as I cut. This is important. If you stay low, you're going to drag your blade along the ground, and that's the last thing you want to do. Okay, we're going to sink down at the very end of it, just so that we have good solid footing, and we're not going to pull ourselves off balance. In training, we exaggerate the motion so that in practical, we just do a slight version of it, okay? And that way, our body does it naturally. We don't have to think about it. Let's start again. So we'll separate the motions. Block, get the blade ready, cut. Again, block, cut. One more time, block, cut. Now we have more of the combination style. It's easier just to drop both blades back. So if we're starting from a neutral position, I bring them back and then 1, 2, or you can just start with them already both back. 1, 2. Again, back, 1, 2. And again, back, 1, 2. Simultaneous is pretty much the same thing. It's just that we end up almost more with just the cut, and this is extra protection. So if I bring both blades back, cut here. Okay, again, cut. All right, so there you have it. Now we have a number of techniques that we can work with. Again, this plays off of lessons that we've already covered, going back to the very first lesson when we were maneuvering around the sword and we were getting used to having just a high guard with our front blade and then maneuvering around it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work this into drilling with a partner and then into your own sparring. Don't think of it as always, it has to be just that simultaneous. The most common is going to be the 1, 2, and especially as a point of entry. So you clear the weapon and then you attack from underneath. But lots of different ways to use this, lots of different types of footwork to do these. And I think this is an excellent way to bridge into more dual wielding techniques. So work on these ones. Focus on those 3 different phases. There's always something to learn from those, and start exploring adding other techniques that you may have learned already at this point, or if you're coming back to this, techniques that you've learned since then and you want to learn how to employ. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next.